Good morning and welcome to session 6A for safety. I know I've been working on the GDOT safety contract for the last 7.5 years, so I'm passionate about safety. I have 2 teenage drivers and 4 more on the way. Yes, that's 6 kids. And so that also makes me passionate about safety personally. We have 3 tremendous speakers with us today. And I'll be introducing each one of them, but each has a critical role in safety here in the state of Georgia, and so we'll be happy to hear from each one of them. There is a slight misprint in the technical programming booklet. Our sign out there was correct, but we'll make that correction here as we go forward. Our first speaker, and she'll be talking about HSIP implementation, is Kelli Roberts. And she graduated with her bachelor's in civil engineering from Georgia Tech and is a registered professional engineer in the state of Georgia. She has over 5 years of traffic safety analysis and design. Kelli currently serves as a safety program manager after joining the department now 2 years ago. She recently adopted her second pit bull, Eugene, from Fulton County and wants to encourage everyone to foster. So we'll save all the questions till the end. So if you got a question, jot it down. We will use the microphones because we are streaming. But without further ado, Kelli Roberts.
I think I got it, yeah. Hello, everyone. Sure, we're all getting a little hungry. One second, it's spinning. How's everyone enjoying the conference? Yeah, I know I was at karaoke last night. That was fun. All right, so now let's get into what we're actually here to talk about today. So my name's Kelli, and I currently manage the safety program with GDOT. So what does that mean? That means I'm in charge of the HSIP dollars. So that stands for Highway Safety Improvement Program. And so as part of my job, I just wrote this, or my team, wrote this implementation plan. And so that is what I am going to be presenting to you today. So starting with 3 takeaways. So safety first. You know, vehicle crashes are one of our nation's most serious social, economic, and health concerns. GDOT has an extremely strong traffic safety culture and prioritizes safety in every single project we deliver. Striving for zero. So our ultimate goal is to have 0 fatalities and serious injuries on our roadway network, and we are committed to doing everything within our power to make that happen. And then a comprehensive and innovative approach. So we like to take a proactive approach to address the multiple factors that influence crashes. And by exceeding federal requirements, implementing innovative safety countermeasures, and using innovative data, we can be at the forefront of safety for this nation. All right, so the GDOT safety program, as I said, these are the HSIP dollars, so federal dollars here. And we look at things in terms of severity for crashes. So as you can see below, we have the CABCO scale. So K represents fatal. Then you have your 3 levels of injury, so serious injury, A, B, B, minor injury, and then C is your complaint injury. And then O stands for property damage only. So HSIP provides federal funds for the implementation of safety projects on our roadways. And by conducting data analysis, we can allocate resources strategically and prioritize projects that will result in the most reduction of fatal and serious injury crashes. All right, so we have safety performance targets. They are set by the state and assessed by FHWA. So those include 5 metrics and 3 special rules. And these are them. They're based on number of fatalities, fatality rate, number of serious injuries, serious injury rate, and number of non-motorized fatal and serious injury crashes. And then we also have 3 special rules. So we have our high-risk rural roads, older drivers and pedestrians, and our vulnerable road users. And that last one is actually the newest special rule that was signed into legislature with the signing of our bipartisan infrastructure law. All right, so these safety performance targets are based on a 5-year rolling average that is soon to change to a 3-year rolling average. And this is the 4th cycle on which states have set these metrics, and they've been assessed by FHWA. So you can either be considered to have met or made significant potential towards your goals or not. And to be able to be considered to have made that metric, you need to basically hit 4 out of those 5 metrics that were on that previous slide. And so we were notified about how we did in April, and then our implementation plans were due in June. So this was handed off to FHWA June 30th. All right, so let's talk about it nationwide. What's it look like? So this is for that first year. Remember, this is the 4th cycle of which we're doing that, and this is the first year. So this represents crash data from 2014 to 2018. And as you can see here, we did not make our safety performance targets. So that's what that red color is states that did not hit the goal. And so as you can see here, we were unfortunately in that category, and 27 states were as well. I'm sorry, 27 states made significant progress towards their goals. So as you can see from the chart above, that percentage has been going down across the years, essentially. So this is the analysis for the most recent years. So this represents calendar years 2017 to 2021. And as you can see, the number of states that have met their goals has drastically decreased from 27 to 10. And I guess, so for our calendar years 2019 and 2020, we did meet our goals. And then coming back to 2021, we did not meet our goals. But this is just to show that this is really a nationwide problem. These fatalities and traffic crashes, this is a nationwide problem. This is not specific to Georgia, but it is concerning and something that needs to be addressed. And that is the purpose of this plan, is to analyze the data and come up with strategies and projects to help reduce these numbers and then get to our goal of 0. All right, so let's look at the Georgia metrics specifically. Here you can see our actual targets. And that's another thing about targets. You know, we are going to do everything within our power to get to 0. So it's great to have these targets and to assess ourselves, but ultimately we're going to do everything within our power to get to 0. So you can see for the actual number of fatalities, technically we met that goal, but then for the following metrics, we did not. So overall, we were considered to have not made significant progress. And you can see the percent differences by which we missed those metrics as well. And then we also have rulings on our special rules as well. So HRRR, that rule is if the fatality rate increases over the last most recent 2 years, you must allocate 200% of the funds that you set aside in fiscal year 2009. So what does that look like for us? That's about $6 million. But our goal is higher than that, at closer to 10. And these high-risk rural roads are defined by our state SHSP. And I guess I'm talking about these rules because we qualified for all of these rules. So we did see an increase in the fatalities on our HRRR roadways. Similarly, we also met the metric for older drivers and pedestrians. So this one's actually based on per capita instead of vehicle miles traveled. And that bottom table, you can see the actual population of older drivers and pedestrians. So the number has increased, but nationwide, we've stayed pretty consistent at about 3% compared to our total state population. So this is a new one for us. You can see the design handbook for aging populations and roadways. And so, our next step is to really dive into this and see what we can do to help address this trend. And then finally, we also have our vulnerable road user special rule. That's 15%. So I guess I'll start with what is a vulnerable road user, right? So these are pedestrians, cyclists, people walking, rolling, biking, whatever it may be, and they're vulnerable. So If 15% of your fatalities are attributed to that emphasis area, the following fiscal year, you are required to allocate 15% of your HSIP apportionment to that emphasis area. Um, and here you can see some data why. So at the bottom, we have a graph just showing the percent of our vulnerable road users and compared to our fatalities. So we are definitely hitting that 15% mark. We're closer to the 18-20% range. So this is definitely an identified emphasis area for us. And why? Well, because they're exactly what they are. They're vulnerable. Due to the size of vehicles, there's limited sight distance. Speed is very, very impactful when it comes to our vulnerable road users, and you have a much higher likelihood of not surviving a crash going 40 miles per hour. All right, so why are we seeing this trend? What's going on? Because again, this is nationwide. This isn't specific to Georgia. So the year 2020 really marked a turning point with the pandemic disrupting daily routines, travel patterns, and overall road usage. So despite the initial declines in traffic volumes during those early stages, unexpected consequences emerged with speed. So the combination of fewer vehicles on the road altered driver behavior and increased risk taking. And so that resulted in a surge of fatal and serious injury crashes nationwide. And you can see some data to kind of support that. So people were speeding more, they weren't wearing their seatbelts, maybe they were driving under the influence, driving distracted. I mean, people were stressed out, and that translated into their behavior on the roadways. All right, so let's talk about Georgia and our crash trends and where we're going. So I did this based on the 3-year moving average instead of the 5 because that's what we're moving towards. And the reason why I want to bring this up is because due to the data we've seen since COVID, we're most likely going to continue to have to write these implementation plans for the following years due to that data just impacting. So as you can see, we were declining for fatalities from about 2016 to 2019, and then COVID really, really hit us hard, again, just nationwide. And then what we're also seeing here is just a general increase in our serious injury crashes. And I'll talk a little bit more about that soon. But I do want to say for this year, 2023, we are seeing current trend downwards. So we are confident that we're actually making it out of those COVID years, you could say, and we're returning back to, a more normal driving behavior, driving pattern, and things like that. All right, so let's talk about the fatalities. 53% were roadway and lane departure, 20% of those being our vulnerable road users. And then when we look about intersections and angles, 34% of our fatalities are happening at intersections, and then angles account for 23%. So this just kind of shows you what we look at in the data and how we identify the projects to help reduce these numbers. Let's take a look at it by road user. So vulnerable road users include pedestrians and bicyclists here. You can see that pedestrians are much more significant than cyclists based on this data for fatalities. And you can see a marked increase too with the onset of COVID. That proportion is just increasing at, frankly, an unacceptable rate. All right, so looking at the serious injuries, you can actually see a decrease for our roadway and lane departure crashes and our vulnerable road users, but the intersections and the angle crashes are going up a lot. And here you can see the trend, we're just steadily going up as well. So this is another area that we want to focus on and try to reduce. And again, by user type, you can see those marked increases with the onset of COVID with 2020 and 2021. You can also see a concerning trend with motorcycles here that we've identified. So that's something that moving forward, we're going to try to look at and tackle. All right, and so that kind of leads into our emphasis areas. How do we come up with these emphasis areas? We look at the crash data. And so here we are. We have our vulnerable road users, roadway and lane departure, intersections, that kind of goes along with our angle crashes as well. And then I put our special rules, as well as off-system safety. All right, so we are a benefit cost-driven program. So everything we do, we take a look at. And these are our numbers. So overall, we're seeing about 239 BC, and that's mainly due to all the rumble strip packages we've been doing. As we identified, roadway and lane departure crashes were an extreme emphasis area for us. So we rolled out rumble strips, cable barriers, those types of projects, and we're able to do so with quick delivery, and we're seeing reductions this year. But these are the type of improvements that we do for those specific emphasis areas. So you can see we do lane reconfigurations, arc cuts, roundabouts, those type of intersection improvements. And then we also have, our pedestrian and cyclist improvements. All right, so let's talk about the money. Don't get too excited by these high dollar values because I will tell you I still don't have enough. So here you can see our federal apportionment, that's the actual bar, and then you can see our actual allotment. So like I said, GDOT has an extremely strong traffic safety culture, and we have added additional funds to maintain this robust program because safety is number one in our eyes. And so I think specifically, in 2021, we matched the HSIP apportionment by 115%. And from 21 to 23, we matched the apportionment by 57 to 59%. So just emphasis of our strong traffic safety culture. All right, let's talk about the progress. So I think I said FY 2021 was the last year that we were considered to have not made significant progress to our goals. So that was the last time that we wrote an implementation plan. So first step was to look at that plan. Let's see, how far have we come? So number one is the CABCO scale. So that was actually incorporated into our crash reports in 2019. Severity costs were developed put into our crash reports in 2018. Severity costs were developed in 2019. And then they were actually updated most recently in 2023. And so I know we've talked a lot about our serious injuries and those trends. And so coming up with appropriate values for those severity crashes is really important and helps for that BC and address those trends. New metric, also known as AASHTO Wear Safety. Hopefully you've heard this in many other presentations that you've been to, but this is our publicly available crash data platform, and we are just constantly updating it with different data sets so that we can, better identify projects. So some of the most recent ones, updates, we've added transit stops, and we also have some equity filters as well, such as the Social Vulnerability Index that was developed by the CDC. And that kind of goes into our socioeconomic factors. So those were our goals in 2021. And looking back now, I can say we've done that. We've succeeded for that data analysis. Another goal was quick delivery. And again, we've been successful about this. So from then to now, we have developed these 3 new delivery mechanisms because, again, our goal is to get to 0. How are we going to do that? We have to actually install infrastructure, so we need to make that as easy and accessible as possible. And so we've come up with menu of service design. That's essentially a PDP light. So any project that has no right-of-way and limited environmental impacts can use this delivery mechanism. And it's got a shortened, P6 schedule, and we can get projects out in, a year, which is incredible. And these types of projects can range anywhere from packages of PHBs all the way up to a roundabout. So there's a lot of opportunity with this delivery mechanism. We also have our equipment purchase. So basically, we'll purchase the infrastructure, and then the local agency has to install and maintain it. And so that's another way that we can get that infrastructure out there faster. And also, that's a great partnership with our local agencies. And then this next one I'm most excited about is called IDIQ. And so for the first time ever, safety will have an on-call contractor that is able to go out and do maintenance type efforts. I don't know how many of you guys have been on RSAs, but you can imagine the number of recommendations, striping, signing, and marking recommendations that we make on those RSAs. Well, now instead of making them and just kind of pushing that off onto the district, we can actually implement those recommendations, which is great. All right, so another thing we identified was complete streets. So when we previously drafted this plan in 21, we had just finished the analysis for the in-town multimodal study. And since then, we have been successful at actually implementing those projects. So great progress there. I think we identified a total of either 14 or 17 corridors. I can't remember. But a total of 9 are currently completed or in progress. And what's really great about that is that has really expanded into other complete street efforts outside of the city of Atlanta. So now that's another one of our emphasis areas is looking at roadway reconfiguration projects to help those vulnerable road users. All right, so let's get into some noteworthy practices. That was the updates from the previous plan, but what else are we doing? What new are we doing? Well, we're diving a lot more into systemic projects. So one of them is sharp curves. So we had some research that we conducted with Georgia Tech, and they came up with a really awesome tool that shows us, where the sign should be and things like that. So different tiers of curves and things like that. And then another one is our always stop. So that just kind of speaks to the variability in crashes. Who knows when someone's going to be distracted and just accidentally blow through a stop sign, resulting in a fatality. So what can we do ahead of time to have, advanced signing, advanced marking, alert drivers of the intersection so that they're more aware, and that's a little bit more of a proactive approach to safety. All right, driver behavior, we talked about that, right? COVID changed driver behaviors, and that resulted in an increase in our fatal and serious injuries. So under the umbrella of Drive Alert Arrive Alive, we have See and Be Seen for our pedestrians. We also coordinate with our office of communications, and they do, PSAs for Drive Alert Arrive Alive on the interstate. If you've seen those, they also do some for motorcycles as well. We talked about that earlier. So the ones they do for that is look twice, save a life for the motorcycles. And then we also have a really great foundation that we've partnered with called Let's See 43. And so what we do is we'll host safe driving summits throughout the state, directed at teens, young drivers to help reduce impaired and distracted driving throughout the state. We also have a key and lanyard that you can see pictured down there that's given out by Hero anytime you call for some assistance. So again, just having that traffic safety culture department-wide is really important. Again, our local roads, so those are very important to us. We developed this dashboard to help the analysis go faster, essentially. I think we all know what SS4A is by now, but there's a large pocket of federal funds available for the locals now. So our goal with developing this dashboard was to have this kind of be your quick and dirty SS4A analysis application. And we actually did workshops. We had FHWA come down. We had representatives from NHTSA and New Metric, and we hosted workshops for our local agencies. And not where they just came in and, watched me talk about the data, but they had their laptops there and they were drafting the plans. They were asking us questions. What should we look at? What countermeasures should I consider? Things like that. So that was really great. And this is a publicly available dashboard. If anyone doesn't know about it or wants to learn more, we can talk about that. And then innovative. I talked about that at the beginning. We want to stay in the forefront of safety. So what does that mean? We're looking at a lot of conflict detection as well. So near miss. We know that our pedestrian and bicyclist crashes are typically an underreported data set. So we want to get ahead of that. And they're also vulnerable. So we want to see what's going on, what's happening. Is there near miss data that we can use to help make decisions to select countermeasures instead of just relying on the historical crash data, using data before the crash actually happens to prevent it getting to our goal of 0. And then we have ITER's Clear Guide. There was actually an ITE meeting where there was a presentation about this as well. But this allows us to rank our corridors in terms of speeding. So you can identify where your highest corridors are, either for number of people speeding or percentage of people, and you can actually define that miles per hour over by which they're traveling. So this is great partnership with law enforcement if they wanted to do targeted enforcement, as well as for us if we want to do some speed management or things like that. And then tying in with the theme of the conference, oh, the places we'll go. This is what we identified in our plan as what we're working on, what we have in progress, where we want to go with the program based on, the data that we're looking at. So again, our vulnerable road users. We actually have an entire another document that we're drafting about that. It's called the Vulnerable Road User Assessment, and that's due to FHWA in November. So we are currently working on that with in-house forces. Very proud to say that. And we are also looking more systemically, looking at transit crossings, looking at trail crossings. How can we improve that infrastructure for our vulnerable road users and be proactive about it? And then PHB design. On the bottom, you can see 2 PHBs on ponds in the middle of Atlanta, and they look very different, don't they? So we have variations in the Z's, in the stage, one's 1 stage, one's 2 stage, and things like that. So we're going to be doing some near-miss analysis on our existing PHBs to determine Georgia-specific preferences for our PHBs, essentially. Determine optimal offsets as well as timing. Are there timing things we can do to help encourage vehicle and pedestrian compliance at these locations? And then, the places we'll go. So Every Day Counts, EDC 7, that is an initiative set forth by FHWA that promotes nighttime safety. And so we are going to do an urban focus. That's going to be our pedestrian focus. And then we're also going to do a rural focus, and that's going to be our sharp curves. So for our sharp curves, we're going to actually go back and do the LED chevron signs to help promote lighting. And then speed management as well. I mean, from COVID, the speeds really increased. The kinetic energy theory has velocity squared, so it's very impactful when determining the severity of collisions. So if there's something that we can do to evaluate and help manage that speed, that's what we're going to be taking a look at. And then our older drivers and pedestrians, we're going to dive deep into that data set. What's going on there? I took a high-level look, and it looked like there were just trends increasing generally with the number of fatalities increasing. But we want to take a look at that. And when we talk about countermeasures, they're not really different from anything we're doing today. We just want to target them in the right places. So again, similar PHBs. Wrong way driving, that's a great one. And just target that in populations where we know there are higher numbers of aging individuals or senior living facilities, things like that. Yeah, okay. And then going back to our 3 takeaways, safety first. We prioritize safety in every single project that we deliver. I know I'm talking for the safety group, but even outside of that, every single project that GDOT delivers has safety at the forefront. And we are constantly striving for 0. Our ultimate goal is to get to 0 fatalities, and we're doing everything within our power to make that happen and make the roadways safe and accessible for all road users. And then how are we going to do this? We're going to do it by taking a comprehensive and an innovative approach, staying at the forefront of data, staying at the forefront of safety. And we'll hold questions till the end, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, next is Tejas Kotak. He's a senior planner at the Atlanta Regional Commission. He has been there for 4 years and works on project level analysis, various transportation performance targets, and safety planning. He previously worked at GDOT developing GIS techniques and custom data solutions, and has a BS in environmental engineering and MS in international affairs, both from Georgia Tech. So help me welcome Tejas.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Tejas Kotak from the Atlanta Regional. Commission, the Atlanta Area MPO. Just show of hands, who here is from or has recently worked in the Atlanta metro area? All right, cool, great. I didn't want to dive too much into Atlanta-focused data if this was a room of more outside of Atlanta folks, but seems like we got a good mix. So I'll dive into our data. So this is a presentation on ARC's regional safety strategy. This is a comprehensive look at both the data planning and engineering efforts we can use to better integrate safety into all the kinds of roadway projects that we help fund and plan for at ARC. Just a picture of me. But also I want to give a shout out to VHB, Gresham Smith, Sycamore Consulting, and Modern Mobility Partners. They were the consultants we hired to help draft this plan. And they were a really great team to work with. And right after we adopted this plan at our board and committee levels, there were a host of local projects that these consultants went out and acquired and are actively working on right now. So they went from developing the RSS to implementing it very seamlessly. So the RSS takes a very comprehensive look at all of our safety issues in the Atlanta region. It tries to proactively build analysis and techniques that we can use before crashes and fatalities and serious injuries even happen. We want to shift to that proactive safe systems approach as opposed to just chasing crash data year after year. It also builds upon previous work that we have done within the Atlanta region, such as our Safe Streets for Walking and Bicycling plan, which was very focused on those active mode and vulnerable road users, as well as safety strategies that we have developed within our regional transportation plan. One thing we really wanted to focus on were the economic and equity foundations of safety analysis and safety implementations. We took some FHWA analysis from a few years ago and focused it in on the Atlanta region. And what we found is that the average economic cost to the region of one fatality is $16 million. It's roughly $1 million for serious injuries. And those numbers are over about a 20-year period. But if we take all of the crashes that occur within the Atlanta region and boil it down to year-over-year analysis, it's $9.6 billion in economic losses to the region. So that is what we are talking about when we are talking about increasing safety. It's not just day-to-day crashes, it's real economic loss to our region. We also did an equity analysis, and the people who are most affected by these crashes is not spread, it's not spread equitably across our region. It's not just everyone. It's very focused on low-income residents, minorities, children, disabled individuals, and the elderly. They are disproportionately the people who are most likely to suffer from these crashes and serious injuries, and that is not even taking into account the familial and social effects of these crashes. Going into the planning side of it, how did we develop the RSS? We did a deep literature and data review, both of literature and data within the Atlanta region, national studies. We looked into NACTO and ASHTO studies on safety. We even went a bit internationally and looked at some international studies on safety and safety engineering. We did really good stakeholder and public engagement through regional surveys, workshops, stakeholder interviews, and citizen focus groups. All of these were done virtually because we started at the peak of the COVID times when there was very little, if any, in-person, face-to-face work. But that allowed us to really reach out to a lot of more diverse stakeholders than we were usually able to do, and do it much more efficiently and economically. So rather than having to go to the outskirts of our region physically, we could do things over Zoom and Teams. And there are pros and cons to that. We were able to find a lot of pros by being able to do more interviews and engage more people than we are typically able to. We, of course, did some really deep and robust data analysis and statistical regressions of our crash types, as well as a network analysis of what do our roads look like and what do road types typically lead, which road types typically lead to severe crashes. And we boiled all that down into safe street visualizations, which I'll give you a preview of high-risk scenarios and lower-risk scenarios. How can we take roadways that are currently likely to lead to high-risk crashes and implement certain planning and engineering techniques to make them safer? Here's what deaths and injuries look like within the Atlanta region from 2013 to 2021. We see an upward trend of both of them, and on average, 600 people are dying every year on our public roadways, and 3,000 people are seriously injured. Similar to GDOT, our goal is Vision Zero. We want 0 deaths and serious injuries on our public roadways, so our current trend line is going very much the opposite of what our goal is. So this plan helps us develop techniques to reverse that trend. We decided to focus in on 3 main crash types for this because they are the most prevalent within our region and the ones that are most likely to result in fatalities and serious injuries. Crashes at intersections, crashes that are involving roadway departure where a car fully or partly leaves the roadway, and those involving pedestrians and bike riders. And for that, we decided to focus in on what we're calling risk factors. So these are things where, from a community context or the context of how a road is built, it is likely to lead to higher risk crashes, to those fatalities and serious injuries. This is a proactive way to approach safety planning rather than just chasing crash data. So what we found for intersection risk factors is functional classification, ownership, operating speed, observed speed, community context, and traffic control techniques are things that lead to riskier behavior. For functional classification, it is our principal arterials, minor arterials, and major collectors, these higher functional classification roadways that we see more of these intersection-related factors on. Ownership, this is more of a proxy. So saying GDOT ownership, changing a roadway's ownership from local to GDOT or vice versa is not going to automatically make a road higher or lower at a safety factor. It's a proxy because GDOT roads tend to be wider lane, higher speed. They tend to have certain sightline issues that either cause speeding or can cause riskier behavior. All the work that Kelli and her team at GDOT are doing are actively trying to address those factors, but historically, roads owned by our state DOT have these risk factors that lead to riskier behavior, riskier driving, and these more severe crashes. Operating speed is something that we were able to get into both due to really heavy data collection that GDOT has been able to give us, as well as a dive into big data that we get from here and in rigs. Community context, this is what kind of development patterns do we see along these roadways. These are not always directly tied to transportation funding or transportation legislation, but it's things like, do we see lower intensity development? Are these warehouse districts? Are these rural or exurban districts? Or are these very urban areas where you see smaller block sizes, a mix of residential and commercial use? Traffic control. On principal arterials for intersections, we see that we have high risk at signalized intersections. For lower functional classes, we see that unsignalized or uncontrolled intersections are those that are more risky. So all of these are very context dependent on multiple factors, and that's something we are trying to be aware of. Moving forward a bit faster for roadway departure, somewhat similar, functional classification, ownership, traffic volume, posted speed, and community context are also very important risk factors here. For pedestrians, much of the same, but the numbers change a bit. So functional classification, we also see principal and minor arterials. Ownership tends to be GDOT roads, so it's our state roadways that we see the most risk for pedestrians. Traffic volume and number of lanes really stand out as high risk factors. So it's those roads that have over 9,000 vehicles per day and 4 or more lanes. Those are the ones that have the highest risk factor for pedestrians. For community context, this is where we get into the more urban and dense areas. These are the ones that more naturally people are going to want to walk these shorter distances and where we see more of that pedestrian activity, but we have not always created the built environment where it is comfortable and safe for those people to walk. For socioeconomic class, we do see the lower income and higher minority populations who tend to be the most vulnerable. For bicycle risk factors, this is where we see a shift in the ownership of it goes to our cities and counties. They are the ones who are most likely to have streets that seem safe for biking or have some kind of bicycling infrastructure already in place. We see a shift in traffic volumes and number of lanes to those that have 2 lanes or only 2 to 4 lanes. Community context, still that dense urban area. An interesting thing that we were able to pull out from the data available to us is a socioeconomic context. Those people who are most likely to bike and most likely to find themselves at risk as bike riders, we see a bimodal split. There are those who are at the lower 20% of median household income, so those who are of a lower socioeconomic class, as well as those at the upper end of the scale. So these people at the lower and higher end of the income scale, they all have very different reasons for choosing to bike. Some of them might do it recreationally, some might do it as an alternative to driving a car while they are saving up, or some might do it for purely environmental reasons. In some ways, that is very useful for us to consider from an equity perspective. In other ways, it doesn't matter. These are all vulnerable road users because for whatever reason, they are choosing to take a bike out onto the roadways, and we need as public agencies to serve them all. We were able to take all of this data and create these maps that are publicly available on ARC's open data website. These rank every intersection and every roadway and street within the ARC region on these different risk factors, and for intersections, roadway departure, pedestrians, and bike riders. These are things that we have already distributed to our local agencies, our friends at the GDOT planning office, and private consultants and friends in academia have also used these for their own analyses. So this is a product that has already been distributed pretty widely. For all of these, we want to focus in on proven safety countermeasures. These are from FHWA. These are engineering and planning techniques that local, state, and private agencies can really focus in on, that we know that these can help solve a lot of safety issues. For intersections, we see some simple things such as backplates with reflectors. We see roundabouts as ones that these are becoming increasingly popular within the region and within the state. I believe GDOT has over 500 roundabouts throughout the state, with that number expecting to double within the next few years. So roundabouts are something that our partners at the state level are really aggressively trying to build out throughout our state, and that's something that at ARC we are happy to see. Various methods of corridor access management, R-cuts, yellow change intervals. These are all standard engineering techniques of ways to re-signalize intersections or rebuild an intersection, and they all have massive safety benefits. Roadway departure, it is those rumble strips and safety edges that Kelli mentioned a little while ago. It is median barriers, having those guardrails on intersections that along the side of the road that really help to prevent roadway departures, or when they do happen, make them less likely to result in a death or serious injury. For pedestrian bicyclists, A lot of these work for both, and sometimes it's just a matter of how much right-of-way do we use. Simple things, crosswalk visibility, having these pedestrian-focused lighting, uh, bike lanes. At ARC, when we're doing project evaluation, we are largely going to be looking at bike lanes that have some kind of protection of steel, asphalt, or concrete. That will be context dependent. There are certain areas where just a strip of paint might be useful, but by and large, we're seeing that paint is not protection. So we're looking at some kind of barrier between people driving and people riding a bicycle. Uh, Walkways and trails are a very standard thing for pedestrians and bike riders. So none of this is very new when it comes to engineering. It's just stuff that is, for too many of our roadways, has been under implemented. And of course, speed management. This is something that can help drivers, pedestrians, bike riders, all kinds of roadway users. Anything that can help to reduce speeds, whether it's speed safety cameras, which are currently not allowed within the state of Georgia, but if they were, these could help from an enforcement mechanism, variable speed limits on certain roadways, and then certain planning techniques such as local road safety plans or RSAs that our state is very aggressive at planning out and partnering with local agencies to do. A little bit on our engagement approach. We went from a regional perspective. We had committee presentations to our governing committees. We did a lot of online surveys. We had a focused workshop that involved staff from ARC, our consulting groups, as well as some outside and citizen groups. We did targeted interviews around the region and with peer MPOs and DOTs across the nation to better understand what they are doing to implement safety projects and to plan for them. And then we had, I believe, 7 citizen focus groups all across the region to gauge what do our citizens and what do our nonprofits really want us to look at when we're doing safety analysis and implementation. Broad takeaways. Safety and mobility are these competing or complementary ideas. Do we want to move a lot of people, a lot of cars efficiently and quickly, or do we want to move them safely? There are some areas where we can do these things at the same time. A lot of, say, roundabout implementations, you can do these things at the same time. You can move more cars and more people in a very quick and efficient manner while also increasing safety. But in most cases, there is a trade-off. And we have to be cognizant of that and understand that there are social and economic and value propositions here of what do we care about more? People traveling our roadways in a safe manner or just doing it as fast as they can? This is something that has been a clear conflict for decades, and we really have to start grappling with it a lot more now. Context is key. How we implement safety, where we implement it, for whom we implement it is very important. Equity is not necessarily inherent in our countermeasures. That goes to the who, where, and why. Education of any kind is essential. It could be things like this where we're talking to each other about how best to do it, how best to implement and plan for safety. It could be talking to our citizens, talking to elected officials on how to implement safety and why it's important. Funding is a major challenge. That's all I need to say. Coordination goes to that education role. How do we do it? How do we coordinate? Who do we involve in the process to make sure we get to the right result, whatever that is? And understanding what ARC's role is as our metropolitan planning organization. We want to provide data, guidance, technical expertise, and advocacy. We're not the ones who are building the projects, but we can provide money, we can provide data, we can provide more things like this when we're talking to our local stakeholders. Now let's go into the solutions. We want to adopt a safe system approach. This is something that we are seeing the federal government really push, and something that we got a few months ahead of them on. So, a few basic tenets of the safe system approach. Deaths and serious injuries are unacceptable. We want to move to Vision Zero. humans make mistakes. They are vulnerable. We just have to acknowledge that no transportation system will ever be perfect because they're being operated by imperfect beings. Responsibility is shared, and that's a core thing of this is not about casting blame. This is not about litigiousness. This is the idea that responsibility is shared. So if certain roadways are seen as unsafe, there is a responsibility from the politicians who are in charge of that roadway, the planners and engineers who made it or who could remake it. It is about accepting responsibility that I have the ability to do something different, so I should. Redundancy is crucial. We have to create various ways that a roadway is safer, and safety is proactive. If we understand that a roadway is unsafe, we should try and fix it before there's a serious crash. Site-specific, crash-based versus systemic, we have to use both of these techniques. Some of it will be reactive to crashes and unsafe areas that we already know exist, and some will be systemic, whereas we don't know if a crash has occurred here or if a near miss has happened here, but we have proactive data analysis that suggests, yes, it could happen here. So we have to combine both of these techniques moving forward, but at ARC, we're moving a bit more towards that systemic and proactive analysis. Just to show off the map again about one way we can be more proactive. And we created a lot of high risk and lower risk scenarios for engineering and for visualization. I want to just go through one or two of them rather than go through all of them given our time constraints. So I'm going to skip to scenario 3. This is a 4-lane road on a corridor that has fairly high speeds. It has wide roadway lines. There is a lack of dedicated bicycling facilities. There are pedestrian facilities on both sides of the roadway, but due to certain access management, we also see that trucks or cars can block significant sections of those roadways. We have bus service, but not a very comfortable area for those transit riders to sit or wait for their bus. So how do we take this kind of roadway and make it safer? We can make it look like this. We can add a wider walkway. We can add in some greenery to have that barrier between the roadway and where people are walking or biking. We can add protected bike lanes where possible with striping, with concrete, with vertical delineators. We can space this out, add a turning lane in the center so there is some sort of paint-focused median barrier. Farther in the back, you can see that we've added a bus shelter here. All of these are on the menu of engineering techniques we can use. Most roadways are not going to go from this to this. But if we use even a few of these techniques to make roads safer, there's a lot of value in that for people who use it. So that's the idea here. It's not that you have to use all of these engineering techniques, it's that all of them are available to us and we should begin using more of them. Gonna skip ahead. All right, a little bit on the safe system approach again. Our traditional approach for decades has been preventing all kinds of crashes. Safe system suggests let's move specifically to deaths and serious injuries. If we can reduce the most severe crashes, we are likely to reduce all the other ones as well. We focused previously on improving human behavior. Safe systems suggest that humans are going to make mistakes. We should care about human behavior, especially when it's something preventable through more education. But in general, we should care more about designing for human mistakes and limitations, that we can fix a lot of these human behavior problems, such as speeding and distracted driving, through engineering techniques. We can either make them not happen at all, or if they do happen, and if and when they do happen, reduce the risk. We can make more fender benders as opposed to deaths and serious injuries. Controlling speeding is still very important, but the overall goal is to reduce that system kinetic energy, which is still going to be speeding focused, but there are various ways we can do that other than just focusing in on speeding. As opposed to saying individuals involved in the crash are responsible, we all share responsibility. Everyone who is involved in creating and managing a roadway has some level of responsibility and culpability, so let's take that and use the power we have to make a safer system. And as opposed to reacting just based on crash history, proactively identify and address those risks. There's a regional and local focus of like what ARC should do versus our local governments, and this is something where we're continually trying to find the right balance for what we can and should do versus our local governments. Our local and state governments are the ones building and managing these projects, so they share a little bit more of that responsibility compared to ARC. But we can fund projects if they seem good. And just moving towards zero, continually a thing that is on our minds, and we're trying to figure out the best ways that we can actively do that year over year. Recent progress, we have had a lot of local plans that are implementing the RSS and similar techniques. We've had 10 action plans from the SS4A within the Atlanta region. The city of Atlanta was awarded $30 million to implement an actual engineering solution. City of Atlanta is developing a Vision Zero plan. Cobb County, Paulding County, and our 4-year metropolitan plan update are also planning techniques here. So we've seen a lot of progress in implementation of this plan. Thank you all for your time. I hope to take your questions at the end of this.
Thank you, Tejas. Next, we have Oladimiji Onaba. He graduated from Florida A&M University with a bachelor's degree of science in civil engineering. Ola is a registered professional engineer in the state of Georgia. Ola's career with GDOT started in District 7 construction, District 7 pre-construction, the TMC, where he joined the RAID team in 2015, and State Signal Maintenance Office. Currently, Ola is one of their state traffic operations managers for GDOT and is over the RAID team and plan review programs. Help me welcome Ola.
All right. Okay, my name is Onabanjo, Onabanjo, State Traffic Operations Manager, RAID Team and Plan Review. So today's presentation will give you insight on the RAID Team and so 3 quick takeaways: RAID Team Plan Review, what their responsibilities are, alternative intersections in Georgia, RAID Team initiatives. This is part of GDOT's mission statement. Transportation system focused on innovation and safety, ability. So these goals are what we kind of focus on, so that we get the best out of our intersections and corridors. Here's a map of Georgia, where we have 159 counties, 7 GDOT districts, about 59,000 square miles of farmland, rural, urban, coastal, mountainous terrain. So we got a little bit of everything in Georgia that we have to deal with in context-wise of alternative. But before we proceed, got a quick pop quiz. Can anyone name the county that has the second most roundabouts on and off system? I know the first would probably be easy. That's why I'm not trying to part ways with my beverage. But if you know the second one, you can have my beverage. No. Kawita? All right. Nice try. Oh, you said I get to keep my ticket. One more, Glenn? Sorry. Well, the answer is Gwinnett County. Oh, man, you could have had it. Darn it. And the first is Fulton County, of course, doubling that of Gwinnett. So here's a map of GDOT, our progress on roundabouts, roughly 400 operations statewide, 50 under construction on state routes, and about 30 being proposed on state routes as well in design. So alternative intersections, alternative intersections. So this section will just kind of show of hands of anybody recognizing what this is. RCUT, correct? Reducing the through and, or redirecting the through and left turn from the side streets to utilize downstream U-turns. RCUT is a proven safety alternative versus open median intersections. Next one here, anybody can tell me what this is? Green T it is. It's signalized variant of the high T, so you have the continuous flow on the main line and a channelized left turn from the side street. Here, can anybody tell me what these are? Big circle? Close. So the answer is mini roundabouts. Yes, small circle. Yeah, fully mountable central island ICD ranging from 70 to 90 feet with illuminated ballers in the central island to give drivers that perception that there's something in the center of the roadway intersection. Next, I guess I'll just introduce the RAID and plan review groups. This is the team. Laura Nesbitt is the RAID team supervisor, and she has Daisy and Kendra underneath her. Colin Abbey is the plan review supervisor, who has Xavier Hunter. Dive into their responsibilities. So starting off with RAID, sure some of you might want to know what RAID stands for, roundabout and alternative intersection design. And so for the most part, the team handles the ICE evaluations, or ICE. It's a data-driven process where provide us with the crash data, ADT volume, truck volume percentage, and use that information to kind of find the best feasible alternatives for implementing in an intersection or along a corridor. As well as that, they review capacity analysis, provide assistance to our internal and external customers. Internally, maybe some concept layouts or some design refinement, and external courtesy reviews for roundabouts. Next, they're responsible for roundabouts and service reviews, where we sit down with local district and get their feedback on what's going on with certain roundabouts and how can we update them, how can we make mitigations so that they can improve operations and safety at the location, as well as the RAID team provides alternative intersection design guidance, operational reviews, and gathers OSOW data for geometric checks. So roundabout and service reviews, we sit down with district office and kind of go over high level what the crashes are, screening what's going on, what's on the ground. We have signs, are we missing signs, things of that nature, operational review analysis. We just come up with low level and some high level mitigation to make sure that the location is operating and safe as possible. So here, State Route 5 at State Route 166, we have some low-level hanging fruit type mitigations where it's like transverse rumble strips, as you can see. Then we have double indicated yield signs, pedestrian crossing. All these things will help contribute to the safety of the intersection, as well as promote pedestrian usage. Now, just to take it a little bit further, a little deeper, this is something that probably would need a quick response. And here, this is where we would actually propose flattening out the exit curvature so that we could have a little bit more space to create more geometry on approach to the roundabout, get that traffic calming that probably can add a little bit more value to slower speeds, long approaches to a roundabout. And as well, I don't know if you noticed, but then we're also proposing like adding color and texture to the truck apron and glitter island, along with the D1-5 sign. So this would probably take the work of a quick response to implement. Here we have grade teams design validation checks. This is something that the team often does with roundabout projects. Their practical design review as well, and updating, maintaining roundabout analysis tool. So here we kind of noted that we have the NCHRP 1043. We're kind of still going through that to see how it lines up with our guide and what's new, something that we might want to implement as well within our guidance for roundabout design. Roundabout validation, design checks, basically just what we're looking for is the fastest paths, roundabout configuration, making sure it matches up with the operational analysis that's provided. And I guess a quick note, just if we're doing swept paths, kind of have different color schemes for your either your body of your design vehicle, front axle and rear axle, so we know where the cab is going and trafficating throughout the roundabout. Practical design review, 30% PDR. What is it? It's basically a process where after concept, everybody has, well, design team probably has a little bit more information. They have utility information, they have more ESA information. Where can they place their roundabout, their approaches to the roundabout, what restrictions do they have? So sometimes some things change, but for a safety program, those changes really affect their B over C. So we want to make sure that they maintain that so they could get their projects out and let and still be qualified. So here the team basically looks at roundabouts and DDIs and displaced left turns and median U-turns. That's what the asterisk is for. So usual submittals, DGN files, has mainline files, profiles, that nature, along with their ICE validation. So, plan review group. Essentially, we review the concept reports from beginning to end of a project, plan reviews, site visits, pre and post construction, and as well being assigning and marking SMEs for the office. We update details, provide comments and guidance, signing and marking plans, well, host, house our drone and aerial video, alternative intersections, interchanges. There's a typical markup by the team. Usually what's usually been missed very easily is not calling out the RA1 detail for the roundabout. See here, we still need to call out for the max height of the founded central island. And as well as having a type of header curb, calling out the color treatment, texture for truck apron. As well as part of the team, we have an on-call service contract with Barge. Their part of it is that they provide on-call support to our internal teams, road design, where they go through and provide that over-the-shoulder guidance on some roundabout features where, let's say, designer is having trouble trying to get the exit curvature the way that he needs it, or the approach curvature where they need it. We would provide that over-the-shoulder guidance, do some roundabout design checks, conceptual layouts for other teams as well. This is concept layout, State Route 92 in Hall County that Barge provided for the project. And here, as you can see, it has a multi-lane approach with raised lane dividers, spiral cut through the circulatory roadway. So what's key about this is that the entering design speed, if everybody stays in their lane and not cross over, and that what the raised lane providers provide is that you get much lower speeds, which improves safety, reduces those severe crashes. So that's one of the key implementations for the raised lane dividers. Quite frankly, it should be probably default if you got a multi-lane approach roundabout coming through. So keep that in mind. Next one, we have use on construction design. This was like our very first roundabout project that we tasked Barge with. State Route 113 at 61 Old Alabama 6. So what's interesting about this is we had to fit everything within the existing right-of-way. Couldn't push anything any further, so we were able to get that done and still get some traffic calming on the approach to get that 25 miles per hour design, as well as provide some bike lanes and bike ramps and pedestrian accommodations. I don't know if you can see it, but there's cutouts for the rapid flashing beacons available once pedestrians use. This is just a concept layout, so the real one's probably already in place right now. Well, it's working to be put in place because we had to do 8 months versus the regular design windows like 2 or 3 years. So we had to kind of expedite this sort of implementation for the use of contract design. Here, key feature, raised lane divider. Once again, make it the default setting if you have a multi-lane approach. Start with this configuration first, well, the raised lane divider first, and then work your way on to different cases. The safety benefits of it is basically getting those reduced speeds. You're not crossing over to the other lane to get the fastest path. You're actually we're mitigating that by trying to keep cars into their lane, having them utilize that way to prevent them from crossing over and keeping their speeds low. So here we have detail about the raised lane divider. Type 9 is the default setting one. It's a little bit more forgiving for vehicles that cross up on, but it's a little bit wider. So you have that instinct of being able to correct yourself and still not really cross over into the next lane. Path forward, continuing working with IT subcommittees, being able to provide guidance to our internal, external customers, more training, being able to provide over-the-shoulder courtesy reviews and service reviews with the district offices, auto turn studies, being able to try to see if there's a way to get a little bit more practical design out of the way that we're developing our roundabouts, so that in which case we could reduce costs and spend more elsewhere to get more safety out of the program. Internal services, ICE process, we're we're providing more and more training for ICE. It's going to be one of the continued process that we have is ICE and roundabout design course that we had, I think maybe sometime last year, where we were able to fit like 3 sessions in with in-house design teams with GDOT and give them some guidance on designing a roundabout. And obviously we do have a YouTube video tutorial. Not sure if everybody knows it, but we do have that available. And this is the link to it. I can provide that information outside later. But like, comment, subscribe, go ahead. It's not gonna hurt nobody. And you get to listen to Justin Batson provide commentary on some of the design issues that go into creating a roundabout design. So, cheat sheet, things to take away, get started early in the ICE process, utilize multi-file summary sheet, provide a diagram or layout, especially if you have a corridor project where you have maybe 20 intersections or something like that. You're just getting started, so go ahead and provide a diagram. Don't go too far with a layout, just something that shows us existing and what you might be proposing later on, so that we have an idea as network-wise how it would operate. Concept report, provide SIDRA operational analysis layout sheet. It kind of helps tell the story of what you're doing or how you analyze the roundabout versus what you're proposing in the layout, so that we can see if there's any significant differences between the two. You have a bypass that's not needed, but yet your operational analysis shows a bypass, it's conflicting. So some ways we could save costs there is by removing the bypass, thing that it operates the way that it's supposed to still operate. Take some of those things into consideration. Default used to raise dividers for multi-lane roundabout approaches. And again, if you have corridor projects, PDRs prior to your QCQA submittal, just so that you still have time window to make any changes. Here are some important links. Once again, if you're a local agency and have a roundabout that you're getting ready to design, we have the capacity to give you some feedback and comments for that with a courtesy review. OSOW records requests, provide us your Latin long information, because Georgia has a lot of streets with the same name. So you don't want to have the wrong information on an intersection and then like come back and like, no, we don't have no trailers going through it. Yes, you do. So we want to avoid that as much as possible. Go ahead and give us that Latin long information and ICE email. And that is the end of my presentation. So.
Thank you for sticking with us. I know we're a little over time. We got started a few minutes late. We'll open it up for 1 or 2 questions. And go ahead to the mic.
Yeah, first I want to thank the committee for having a safety session during this meeting. The reason I bring it up is because the very first meeting in 1980 for IT was all about safety. I guess the question I've got for the panel is that in 1980, we spent 2.5 days talking about safety and the 4 E's. And during this presentation, I've heard nobody talk about the 4 E's. If you're going to get to 0, you're going to need to use all 4 E's. Never going to get there just with 1 E. Just my comment.
I'll kind of respond to that. Yeah, so being the GDOT safety program, we're definitely the engineering E in that, but we do have a whole governor's office of highway safety that is focused on the other 3 E's as well as supporting us in the engineering effort. And with the signing of bill, now we are able to spend money on what's called soft infrastructure. And that's what allows our partnership with the Let's C43 Foundation, which is really trying to target that behavioral aspect, which is the trends that we're seeing in our fatal and serious injury crashes.
I want to make a similar comment. At ARC, what we primarily do is we do broad level planning and then we fund infrastructure projects. So we're far more focused on the engineering side of it. We can do some funding and promotion of education, especially with our elected officials and local engineers and planners, but we're focused in more on that education side. When it comes to enforcement, one thing we would love to see more of are things like speed enforcement cameras, red light cameras. That's something where we and our local officials in the state, we need to have more conversations with our state legislature to see if those can be allowed again. They are allowed only in very limited use cases around school zones to good effect so far. So we're hoping that one day they could be expanded for general use. So that's where we are on the enforcement mechanism. So the 4Es, or sometimes they're expanded to the 6Es, they're things we care about, but we at ARC understand that there's a limit to what we can do as a public agency. So we are focusing in on the things that we can do and what we can fund.
All right, well, thank you. We're going to end it there. Thank y'all for joining us, and we will continue to have a great time here at IT Summer Seminar.